Hello guys, so this was just, as I said before, a couple weeks ago, I think it would have been now, I said that I'd be recording intros now for the podcast for most of the episodes for the foreseeable future. And so this week is just me for an episode, and then the week after will also just be me, because that's when the BAFTAs are, and I'll give my opinions on that. And then I've got the Oscars episode, which will be the week after that, and then the week after that will be the day the Oscars happen. And then I'll do an episode with sort of my reactions to the Oscars. I'll be the guest for that one. And that episode might not come out on Monday, it might come out on Tuesday. It really depends on if I can get someone in to record an episode for that day. So yeah, this week I will be covering the 2010 Danny Boyle directed film 127 Hours. Hello everybody and welcome back to another episode about the movies with William Fletcher. As per usual, I am your host, William Fletcher, and this week I will be covering the 2010 Danny Boyle film 127 Hours, starring James Franco and a couple other people, but also not really, because they're not really in it, because they don't really matter, because it's just Dave. It's not Dave Franco. It's James Franco. James Franco's story. This film. So I'm just gonna talk about this film for a little bit, about 20-30 minutes or so, give or take. Just sort of going through the film in mind, as I do with a lot of the episodes that are just me by myself. This film, 127 Hours, was initially released on the 4th of September 2010 at Telluride Film Festival, before getting a sort of wide release November 5th in the United States and the 7th of January 2011 in the United Kingdom. This film I've been aware of this film for a few years now. It was a big hit. A lot of people really liked it. It got nominated for Best Picture. I think James Franco was nominated for Best Actor that year, alongside other great performances like Jesse Eisenberg in The Social Network, or eventual winner Colin Firth in The King's Speech. It received many nominations. I think it also got Best Picture, Actor. I think Adapted Screenplay potentially. Original Song, I think it did. I need to see. So it was nominated for 6 Oscars: Best Picture, Best Actor, Adapted Screenplay, Original Score, Original Song, and Editing. Which is that's a pretty good selection of nominations, and all very well deserved, except for Original Song, which 90% of Best Original Songs just occur during the end credits. Very rarely are they actually in the film itself. I'm trying to think of Can You Feel the Love Tonight is probably one of the biggest examples of a film using a song in the story and you hearing it in the film. A lot of the others, it's kind of this played during the end credits of the film, so it just is but and I don't really remember the song from it. But this film is very good, very very. I don't want to say enjoyable, because it's not like it's a fun film to watch. I mean, it's a man gets his arm trapped between a fucking rock, and he has to cut it off. Sort of in a general sense, this is a very well-made film on a technical level. I think the Best Editing and Original Score nominations are very well justified. I think the editing is absolutely superb. There's a lot of there's a lot of frantic editing, which I think really helps sell the film and really works well to sort of illustrate how frantic and a bit chaotic the film can be at several points throughout its runtime. I think the score is also very good, especially in the very early stages before he gets trapped. It's very well made. It's got beautiful cinematography. There's some absolutely fantastic shots of these sort of surrounding areas of all the various of all the rock formations, and him going over and around the canyons. It's on the technical level, it's very well put together, and a lot of the film is, I don't know if they shot, I don't know, I assume based on how it looks, I assume they must have shot some of the film in the actual locations. I kind of assume that that's sort of because it's like just outside. It's and so yeah, and so there were two cinematographers. They had two cinematographers so that Danny Boyle and James Franco could work for long sections of the day, and then without tiring people out, so these cinematographers could swap, and one would shoot 50%, the other would do the other would do the other half. So they shot in Utah, and they yeah, and so they did shoot. I assume they would have shot in the area where the unfortunate events occurred, because it's not like it's a crazy. I mean, it's just like not wilderness, but it's sort of like big rock formations and that kind of stuff. It's a very like it sort of feels real. It doesn't feel like a set or anything. Presumably, because obviously it wasn't a set. They shot in the actual places where everything happened. So I assume that they went to the real locations where everything happened, and then just shot and just put James Franco in there and just shot it. James Franco does an absolutely an absolutely fantastic job in this. Probably my favorite performance I've seen from him. I know he's not like the greatest person in the world, but I think James Franco is absolutely superb in this film, and I think nominated alongside Colin Firth in King's Speech, Javier Bardem in Beautiful, Jeff Bridges in True Grit, Jesse Eisenberg in The Social Network, and James Franco in 127 Hours. I think he is absolutely fantastic in the film. I think that he gives probably a career best performance, and I do love his performance in The Disaster Artist. I don't know if I've touched on that or not, but I think he's absolutely hysterical in that film. I also am aware that Spring Breakers is a film that he was in, that he was supposedly very good in. I think he gave a really good performance in 127 Hours. I think because a lot of the film is just him by himself trapped behind this rock, and so he's got to really sort of hit certain emotional levels, and it can be hard to kind of hit that, especially since it's not like it's him he's recreating it, but he didn't actually get his arms stuck in behind a rock for real. That, and he had to actually cut it off. And there's so many grids in it, and there's so many really great bits where he gets like the camera and he turns it on, and he talks to the camera. It's like as a message for them, and I think like, this is really good stuff. I think that's those scenes in particular are where Franco really shines, because he really sells the emotions behind it all, and like when he's doing it for like the first day, and there's just so much true great acting on show. I think this is one of the it's a film that works, that if Franco's performance wasn't as good, the film wouldn't work as well. Like him being like James Franco giving as good a performance as he does really makes this film work so much better in a way that it really wouldn't work if he wasn't as good in it. And it's a really a very excellent performance he gives, one probably his career best, and probably will forever be his career best, especially considering recent events that have come to light. But I think like he has created he gives a very good performance, and I do think that he has it's a very much like a performance that it's not like it couldn't have been done by other actors. Like absolutely, like tons of actors could have and probably would have done this role just as good. But I definitely think that he is super is just absolutely excellent in this. And he gives an absolutely fantastic performance in the film. And so it's Yeah, I think it's a very well. Yeah, I've talked about a lot of the technical aspects. I think in terms of a screenplay, I think it's very well written. I'm aware that not everything is exactly accurate. I think in fact there's a bit on the Wikipedia page about the film that talks about how authentic it is. So I will grab that and then just sort of read from it. The actual man who this is based off, Aaron Ralston. So there's an encounter early on. I guess I can sort of go through a bit of the plot of the encounter he has with two hikers. It was slightly altered. So in the film, if you haven't seen the film, spoilers. He shows he shows these two swimmers. He shows these two other hikers like in the film. He shows them this hidden pool and they swim around and do stuff like that, and then but in reality he just showed them basic climbing routes, and then he said he was initially uncomfortable by these changes, but then he goes on to say that the rest of the film is like factually accurate to the point that it is basically a documentary, as close to a documentary you can get and still be like a drama. And so let's just say there's other, there's tons of different things that talk about various different points, sort of authenticity in this film. And there's in the film, actually, James Franco, Aaron, the man he is portraying, never says, in the script he never utters the word "ow," which is factually accurate to the original. It's factually accurate to to what actually happened in real life. So, he does scream and he does shout and he does go through some pain, and he's obviously not happy about the whole thing, but he never says "ow," which, I kind of am like, I mean, yeah, I wouldn't really, if I was in that position, for example, which I thankfully have never been, which is good, it really just, this film really excels and at sort of showing the human condition, I guess, is it in a sort of sense of it really sort of perfectly, I would go as far as say, illustrates and shows sort of the absolute hell that this man went through, and he pulls out on the other side. I don't think it's spoilers to say that he survives at the end, because, well, I did say that the guy who did this, said as much. I did mention that, like, the guy who this is based off of said, yeah, it's factually accurate. So just me saying that basically gives away the fact that he survived. But I wasn't new of that, of that going into the film. So it didn't really work for him. It didn't detract from my enjoyment, or like it took nothing was lost by knowing the fact that the guy that this is based off of is still alive, and he was involved in this film. It took nothing away. I don't think this is a film where it is not like a, oh my god, is this gonna survive or not. It's more a case of like, he's gonna survive, but you just want him to, and you just want to get to that point where he gets free. And so there's a bit about a little over halfway into the film or so where he gets free, where his arm is, for those who haven't seen it and are still listening, his arm is trapped behind a rock. He's like climbing down this thing, and he's holding onto this rock, but it slips, it falls, it crushes his arm. About half of his forearm, like his hand, and like half of his forearm is trapped behind this rock, and so he's stuck for, I think it's like nearly a week or so. He's stuck behind there. So about day 6, so 6 years. 6 years? Jesus, no. 6 days. Imagine if he was stuck for 6 years. He would have died. 6 days, he was stuck behind there for 6 days, and he had to ration out food, and he had to ration out water. There is a bit in the film where he loses like 90% of it, so he then has to drink his urine, which is gross, but it is, if you need to, that's sort of if you're pushed to that point, you kind of have to, no, it's not like anyone wants to drink urine. It's just if you're pushed to that point to survive, people will do that. So, and he, and this film, like, I knew that he got out, and I wanted him to get out, and I knew he would, but it's just, there were so many moments where I was like, he might be able to get it, because there's like a bit at one point where he sets up like a pulley system with like all his ropes and everything, because he's a hiker, and he climbs on things, so he's got these things set up, so he throws the rope, and then he tries using a pulley system, but he's only got one arm because the other arm is completely screwed and just gone and dead. So he tries to, pull it up, and then he tries to, lift it up, and, he obviously can't, and then he has, various, he has, sort of, he has, and, this is a film where there isn't really, there's a lot to talk about if you've got like another person on, but because it's just me, I'm sort of breezing through this, because so much of this film is just James Franco stuck behind a rock, and I think that works to its benefit. I think if it wasn't mostly that, it kind of would be like, well, that's not as interesting. I think the fact that we focus on this one guy trapped behind this one rock in this one canyon for 6 days is why the film works so well. Because if it was anything else, it'd just sort of be like, well, it's not as interesting. But because it's it's this one guy, I think it works super well. And I think again, I keep going back to this, but James Franco gives an excellent performance, and this film really sort of solidifies how great of a filmmaker Danny Boyle is. I've seen 127 Hours, which is great. 28 Days Later, which is also a really enjoyable zombie film. A sequel, not so much. I covered it in an episode back in January, so go listen to that one for my full thoughts on that film. And the first film I saw of his was Trainspotting, because it's arguably his most iconic work. It's only the one. It spawned a sequel out of it. People loved it so much. So, and I love Trainspotting so much, and I would very much love to do an episode covering Trainspotting at some point on the podcast. But that is irrelevant, and that is for the future me to decide. But this film it really solidifies how great of a filmmaker Danny Boyle is, because Trainspotting, 28 Days Later, and 127 Hours are completely different kinds of films. 28 Days Later is like a zombie film, it's a bit more on the horror side. 127 Hours is more of like a thriller, I guess, with more sort of, it's just with one guy. And then Trainspotting is a very it's got a lot of dialogue, and it's a lot of characters talking about stuff, and about druggies and that kind of stuff. But it all works so well, and Danny Boyle's able to work through those. And Danny Boyle's done so many different kinds of films. Yesterday, which is more on the comedic, lighthearted side. You got Sunshine, which is on the sci-fi spectrum of it all. Steve Jobs, which is again based off a real person, like 127 Hours is. And it's just all those other films that sort of go across various different genres and motifs and stuff. And this is better than 28 Days Later, in my personal opinion. I think it works a lot better as a film. Personally, I think it's better written. I'm more invested in the characters. I don't particularly care for zombie films overall. Like, there's some really good ones, like the George A. Romero of the Dead trilogy is pretty great, mostly. Shaun of the Dead, one of my all-time favorite films. The Evil Dead franchise now, because I started watching Ash vs. Evil Dead, but I didn't really connect with the characters as much in 28 Days Later, whereas this, even though I knew he survived and I knew he got out, I still really, really connected with this story, with Aaron's story of him getting out, and there's a couple bits where he has these hallucinations or these dreams of him getting out. So there's like one where it starts raining, and all the rain washes away the rock, and it falls down, and he's able to like escape. And it's like, and in that moment watching the film, I was like, oh, did he actually get out? Like, is this how he gets out? And then he like loses the arm later. Because I knew that he gets out and by getting and he loses his arm. And I was like, I was a bit confused because I was like, but I thought I heard that he cuts his arm off to get out. And I'm just sort of like, okay, this is interesting. And then he goes to his girlfriend's place, well, at the time, girlfriend's place, and he knocks on the door, and she sends him away. And I'm like, okay, this isn't real. And I was kind of like, this is a bit interesting, and also like, this isn't real, is it? And then, you know, he sort of wakes up and he's like, yeah, it's been a dream the entire time, and he has, you know, all these other various sort of realizations about things. He was the two hikers he was talking to earlier. He was, you know, talking to them and was saying he was going to go to a party the next day, and he's like, oh, I didn't do that. And he, you know, there's a bit where he plans to, you know, pleasure himself via a paused frame of a video, but, you know, he decides not to. And, you know, he tries, earlier on in the film, actually, we see him trying to cut through his arm and to cut it off, but, you know, it's just super blunt, and I'm like, okay, so it's good. And I was like, okay, but he's going to use that to cut his arm off, and it's going to be more excruciating because it's blunt, so it'll take longer. And so, you know, he fashions a tourniquet, you know, around his arm, and he tightens it with a carabiner, and then, you know, he starts, well, first of all, he breaks his arms, and you know, he's sort of established that he's sort of familiar with this stuff because he is he's sort of familiar with the torque, the sort of concept of that, and so he sort of twists his arm and breaks the bones in his in like his forearms, and, you know, of course it hurts because he hasn't lost all his feeling, he just lost his feeling up to a certain point, so he, you know, yells out in pain because, you know, he broke his fucking arm. And then, you know, he then, you know, starts cutting into his, you know, arm, you know, with this blunt multi-tool. And it was so cringy and just, like, gross to watch to see this guy just jamming a blunt, you know, multi-tool into his arm. And he's just, like, cutting, you know, and he's just cutting through his arm. And it's like, when I was aware of it and I heard about it, I was like, oh, he's going to use, like, a knife or something, right? And I sort of had it sort of in my mind that, like, yeah, he's going to use, like, a knife, and he's going to use that to cut through his arm. And then when it's introduced earlier, the blunt multi-tool, I was like, oh, that's what he's going to use. And I was just, like, prepping myself mentally to, because I'm not, like, I don't get squeamish easily, but, like, but the difference is, though, because I know this is based off a real thing, and that adds to it. Like, if it's something else, like a film that's not based in reality at all, I usually don't get as squeamish, but I do get more squeamish, I feel, and a bit grossed out by things, if I know, like, this happened in real life, an actual person did this. So I was like, so yeah, when he starts, like, trying to cut into his arm with this, you know, this blunt multi-tool, I'm like, oh no, this is gross, because it's like, he actually did this to himself. He actually used a blunt multi-tool to cut through his arm. And it's just like, that is so, like, insane that to have the sort of the wherewithal and the will and the true, like, I guess, need to live to because I don't think I could survive this kind of situation. Like, if I'm being completely honest, if I was in this position and I got stuck, I wouldn't be, you know, I probably wouldn't survive. I probably would tell people if I was going somewhere where that could happen, as Aaron remembers that he didn't do that. But I probably wouldn't survive if I was in, like, the exact position that Aaron's in. And then, you know, after he amputates his arm off, he just, wraps it up so that, he doesn't lose blood, and presumably also so he doesn't get infected, and then he, and at sort of at this point, he's run out of water. He's been living on his own urine for a couple days at the very least. So he drinks from a gross-looking pond. Like, it is brown. It is gross. It just isn't very appealing. It just man, that is going to cause something bad in your body, mate. It's not going to be good. But he continues on, and he spots a family, and then they help him, and they give him water, and he just downs an entire bottle of water, which is fair enough. He's probably incredibly dehydrated. He probably hasn't had a whole lot of water in the last 6 days, and he's been living on his urine for a couple of days at this point, surely. And then, they alert the authorities, and they are able to get him back to safety. Now, I discussed authenticity a little bit earlier, and they say that he did send to the people to go ahead and get help, and he walked 7 miles before the helicopter came, but in the sort of theatrical version of the film, you don't really see that. It just sort of they disappear, and then it just sort of cuts to oh, here's a helicopter to get him, but there's an alternate ending which sees him continuing on the walk for a little bit longer whilst waiting for the helicopter. I can understand why you'd remove that for a film. It's not necessary to do that. Just he, you should have wanted to just get to the point a helicopter came and rescued him, and you don't need to see, him walking for the 7 miles. But and then there's as is the case with every biopic, every film based on a real person, there's little textual bits at the ends where we see the actual person that the film is based off of, and we only had a kid, and now he always remembers to leave notes for his family if he ever disappears, and he where he's going, and where they can, how long he'll be away and everything. And it's a very nice, uplifting, happy ending, and I think that, works. To be fair, this film does have the story has a happy ending. The man lived, and he made a family, and the film it's a very uplifting ending, and it's just 127 hours. It's just a really, really good film. It was really, really great. Really, I don't want to say enjoyable, but very well made, and definitely a film I'd like to rewatch at some point in the future. So I am going to give 127 hours an 8 out of 10. And that is all for this week's episode. I know that this episode is just me on again. I know that's not always a thing that everybody likes, but I still think it's enjoyable to just talk and vent and get my feelings out, because sometimes that's just nice to just talk to nothing, so you can all listen to me and nobody else can interrupt me. But so I really hope you enjoyed listening to this week's episode. In the intro that will be playing just before this, I discussed the next few weeks of episodes of the podcast. So I hope you all look forward to seeing those episodes, and I will see all of you guys in the next one. Goodbye.